Welcome to the Sunday morning worship service at DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church. My name is Suzanne Gowdy, and I am a member of the Board of Trustees. Unitarian Universalism is a faith tradition committed to creating a just and flourishing world for all people. Our Universalist theology tells us that every person is worthy of love. Thus, when we say, whoever you are, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. This is our message of love to you, inviting your whole self into this space to help us co-create a world centered on our values. We invite you to learn more about us and consider joining this community to enact our values of equity, justice, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity. We are committed to becoming an inclusive, intergenerational community. Thus, each Sunday, we worship together as one. Let us recognize the hearts of our whole community, from our eldest to our youngest, and all those in between. Let us embody the beauty of this all-church community, even when there are a few more wiggles, giggles, and chatter. And the kids may make some noise too. If you feel you need to move to a quieter or less active space, feel free to do so. No harm, no foul. This community centers our values in love. All and all ages are welcome. I have an announcement. If you haven't heard, it's soon going to be time for the auction to 2025. Maybe you have heard something about it recently. Did you know that except for the annual Promise campaign, the auction is our largest fundraising event of the year? All proceeds from winning bids go directly to our operating budget to support our staff, our buildings, our program, our congregation, all of the things for the benefit of all of us. And it's fun too. There are so many ways you can participate, big and small, in both the silent and live auction activities. Stop by the auction table in Creeves Hall today to chat with a happy to help auction team member if you have ideas or questions. Now, if you are online, I invite you to greet each other through the chat. And if you are present here, I invite you to turn to someone you did not come with and greet them with a wave and a good morning greeting.
This light we kindle is set in the lamp of our history. We inherit this free faith from the brave and gentle, fierce and outspoken hearts and minds that have come before us. Let us be worthy inheritors of this faith, and through our good works, pass it boldly to a new generation.
Good morning. Welcome to this place of love, this place of communal flourishing. We gather each week to open our hearts, to expand our minds, and to see the sacred within each other. Come, let us worship together.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we from? Where do what are we? Where come from? Where do what are we? We come from. Where come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where come from? What are we? Where are we
Mystery,
mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery. Life is a riddle and a mystery.
The mission statement of DuPage Unitarian Universalist Church reminds us of who we have agreed to be, who we are. Please join me in reading our mission statement. We gather as an inclusive community to grow in character as we nurture our growth to become a more inclusive and deeply connected intergenerational community.
Our vision of beloved community is rooted in the relationships that we have with one another, our world, and creation. Each week, we offer the opportunity for joys and concerns to be shared here aloud in the pulpit. Denise Sieber shares that her daughter and her neighbors are asking for our thoughts and prayers. A couple who live in her neighborhood were killed in their home, reportedly by a family member who was apprehended by the police within a few hours. Her close-knit neighborhood is devastated. Indeed, Denise, we send you and your daughter and all of her neighbors so much love in this time of grief. Sarah Vanderveer shares this message. I am grieving the sudden loss of my partner of 5 years, Tim, who died of a heart attack at just 45 years old this past week. It has been a deeply emotional time filled with sorrow, but also moments of peace and reflection. I am profoundly grateful for the love and support of this community, which truly sustains me, and I ask for continued care as I navigate this new chapter and honor the memory of the man I so fiercely loved. Indeed, Sarah, we hold you in our hearts. Please know that whatever our joys or concerns are, our pastoral ministries associates and myself are here to walk with you in joy or to companion you in your sorrow. And like many weeks this year, this week has been very heavy. We hold in our hearts all of those who were affected by the shooting and the fire at the LDS Church in Michigan. We hold in our hearts all of those who were affected by the ICE raid in Chicago, and all of those who are holding Gaza in our hearts as even more attacks were perpetuated on that community last night. It is so easy in this moment to be bogged down with fear. It is so easy for it to become overwhelming. This week, we once again, with our family, went through our emergency protocols in the event that my partner would be taken by ICE and that I might disappear as a figurehead. I am not the only person in this room who has had these conversations with my children. I know many of you have. And as I sat in my overwhelm, I do what I usually do. I went into our prairie. In the midst of the asters and the goldenrod, a bald eagle flew over that prairie, reminding me that there is so much more, even in the moment of this intense fear. And I am reminded that there are so many in this nation that have lived in autocratic fear all their lives, for generation upon generation. My partner's family, just one of them. And so in this moment, I share with you the words from Audre Lorde's Litany of Survival, because this is what I reach to remind myself that this is not the first time this is happening, and where I can get courage. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways coming and going in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures like bread in our children's mouths, so their dreams will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk, for by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not remain. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid love will vanish. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive.
The actress Mindy Kaling said, "Gratitude is the closest thing to beauty manifested in an emotion." The giving of our treasure is how we reciprocate the many gifts we are given by this community and how we live our values in this world. Each Sunday, we offer our financial gifts to both this congregation and to an organization that gives life to these values and makes a difference in this world. This month's special collection is the Alive Center of Naperville, nominated by Dean Reschke, who was a founding member. Its mission is to be a teen-led, teen-driven center focused on empowering the youth of today to become the impassioned, resilient leaders of tomorrow. As a nonprofit organization, they offer free drop-in hours after school and over the summer, as well as myriad programs, classes, and events designed to build confident and resilient teens. As we pass our offering plate, know that it is a vessel that connects us to each other through our gratitude and generosity. So give freely of your thankfulness and abundance that our values can forever take hold in our world.
Reciting history is the act of storytelling. How accurate history is dependent upon how accurate, complete, and multi-hued the story is. One of our Unitarian Universalist stories is that of Reverend James Reeb. The story goes something like this. Reverend James Reeb was a Unitarian minister. His ministry was not the sort that ended at the church door or went out of the public eye. He first served as minister of All Souls in Washington, D.C. He was later the director of the YMCA, creating policies of integration. He then became the community relations director for the American Friends Service Committee, working to end housing segregation. He and his wife lived in poor Black neighborhoods of both Philadelphia and Boston with their 4 children, living their values in every aspect of their lives. He believed that to work for racial rights was to live for racial rights. On March 7, 1965, America watched the footage of the voting rights march in Alabama, where state troopers beat peaceful protesters on Edmund Pettus Bridge. The next morning, Martin Luther King Jr. sent a telegram to clergy everywhere, asking them to come and stand with him, a telegram I've actually held in my hand. Reverend James Reeb felt the call to respond. On March 9, 1965, Reeb met his friends, the Reverend Clark Olson and Reverend Orloff Miller in Selma. They had dinner at a restaurant and then left together. As they walked down the street, the three Unitarian ministers were accosted by 4 white men who attacked them, punching Olson and hitting Reeb in the back of the head with a bat. They managed to get themselves someplace safe and then off to a hospital where Reverend James Reeb lost consciousness. His wife made the decision 2 days later to remove him from life support. She received condolence calls from President Lyndon Johnson and Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. On March 15, 3 days after Reeb's passing, President Lyndon B. Johnson invoked his memory as he introduced the Voting Rights Act into Congress. He signed that bill on August 6 of that year. Many UU ministers showed up in Selma, Alabama to march. And it didn't end there. Lay leaders came as well, including Viola Luzo, a Unitarian from Detroit.
It is time to gather, and I would like to invite the young people to come forward and join me as I tell the story of Viola Luzo. Come on forward and join me. You won't be the only one, Sawyer. So I'm going to share a couple stories with you today. The first one is about Viola Luzo, her picture's on the wall. And then I'll tell another one a little bit later, but you won't have to come forward for that one. So once there was a mom named Viola who lived in Detroit. She had 5 kids, a stack of school books on the kitchen table, and a heart that grew bigger whenever she heard the word fairness. At her Unitarian Universalist church, she learned that every person has worth and dignity, and that love should be for everyone, not just a few. One evening, Viola heard news from far away in Alabama. People were marching for the right to vote. They wanted to be treated fairly, to have the same chance to choose their leaders as anyone else. But some people tried to stop them. The news showed pictures of brave marchers on a bridge in a town called Selma, and the marchers were hurt by people who didn't want change. Viola listened carefully. She heard a call for helpers to come, people who could sing, drive, hold signs, and stand together. She looked at her kids, kissed their foreheads, and said, "I'm going to help make things fair." Her family and her church friends promised to take care of the children while she was gone. Viola packed simple things, a toothbrush, a sweater, and her courage. She drove a long, long way to Alabama, following the road like a ribbon of hope. When she arrived, she found a whole community of helpers, black and white, young and old, who believed that love should be louder than hate. They shared songs that felt like sunshine. We shall overcome. The leaders asked for volunteers to drive people back and forth because there's miles and miles between the small towns and the big road. "I can do that," Viola said. "I'm a good driver, and I like to make sure people get home safe." All day, Viola's car became a little island of kindness. She kept extra water in the back seat. She learned new names and new songs. She listened to stories, some hard, some happy. And she told her own story too, how at her church they lit a small flame called a chalice to remind them to bring more light to the world. On the last evening, the air was warm and the stars were beginning to blink on, one by one. Viola was driving with a teenager she had just met. He was tired from marching, but smiling, proud of what they had done together. They talked about how it felt to stand up for what's right, even when your knees shake a little. Then something scary happened. Another car followed them. People who didn't like the idea of everyone being treated fairly. And these people wanted to frighten the helpers and make them go away. And on that dark road, they did a very hurtful thing, and Viola was killed. The teenager lived, and people rushed to help him, but they could not bring Viola back. News of the terrible night traveled fast. Her family hugged one another and cried. The helpers in Alabama cried. People at her church lit the chalice and held hands. They remembered that Viola had come because she believed love belongs to everybody. Leaders promised to find the people who had done this and to keep working for fairness so that no one would be left out. Sometimes, when someone loving and brave dies, it can feel like the world goes dim. But then we remember what they taught us. We remember why they came, and slowly, gently, we carry their light forward. And people began to tell Viola's story so others would know what courage looks like. And they placed her name on signs and plaques. They sang the songs she loved. And every time people lined up to vote, every time a kid wrote a poster that said, "Everyone counts," every time a church lit a chalice and promised to side with love, Viola's light shone again. So if you had met Viola, she might have said something like this: doing what's right isn't always easy. Sometimes your heart pounds and your hands feel shaky, but we don't do it alone. We do it together. We sing together. We keep each other safe. We make sure everyone gets home, and step by step, the road of courage becomes a road of love. So today, when you see a problem, maybe a classmate left out of a game, a hurtful word in the hallway, someone who needs a hand, remember Viola. You don't have to drive across states to be brave. You can speak up kindly, stand next to someone who is alone, share your markers or your snack or your smile. Join your voice with others who are working for fairness. Every small act of love is a mile on the road she traveled. And if you ever feel afraid, you can do what Viola did. Take a deep breath, look for your helpers, and keep going, one caring step at a time. All right, you can go back to your seats. You don't have to come back for the next story.
When you speak the language of your life, I do not know the story. The words are only sounds that leave leave my mind to wander. Perhaps you speak of the mountains, or the child you used to be, of the city of Santiago, and the moment you were free to sing the songs of love, the songs of hungry hearts, and of the dream. Do you speak of the dream when you sing the language of your love? I do not know the story. The words are only sounds that leave my mind to wonder. But when you saw through my heart with a melody, I hear the dancing feet, I taste the salty tears, I know the laughing child and the moment of the dream. When you sing the language, I feel love. And now I know the story. The songs are mighty sounds that fill my mind with wonder. And when you soar through my heart with a melody, I hear the dancing feet, I taste the salty tears, I am the laughing child and the moment of the dream. Come fill my mind with wonder, sing to me the dream.
Thank you, Tony. That was beautiful. The story of James Reeb is a part of the story of the legacy of Unitarian Universalism during the Civil Rights Movement of the 1960s. It's an important part of who we are. Stories are how we understand ourselves and our world. Herbert Anderson and Edward Foley write in their book, Mighty Stories, Dangerous Rituals, that the most compelling reason why stories have such power to engage us is the narrative form of human existence itself. We comprehend our lives not as disconnected actions or isolated events, but in terms of a narrative. We conceive of our lives as a web of stories. The narrative mode serves to foster the sense of movement and process in individual and communal life. Stories hold us together and keep us apart. We tell stories in order to live. And a good story, a story like Reverend James Reeb, gives us pride, gives us motivation, gives us meaning even in the midst of sorrow and heartbreak. It also gives us identity as Unitarian Universalists. We can point to this moment, to this story, as a part of who we are as a people and as a faith community. But stories are also a dilemma, because stories are tales of our meaning-making. They are far less historical facts and much more our own, quote, privileged and imaginative acts of self-interpretation. Sometimes this means that stories have factual errors. Sometimes our stories don't include things that others might find compelling or meaningful to their lives. Mostly it means our stories are just incomplete. Have you ever shared a memory of yours that happened with someone else, such as a sibling or a friend, with that sibling or friend? Are your rememberings the same? The stories the same? Likely not, because our stories are skewed by our own perspectives, but also by the things that happened around the stories, like our feelings of people or events or things that may have happened days, months, weeks, even years after the event. But Anderson and Foley write of another problem with stories. We tell stories so we can live with them, so we can live with ourselves. We modify and change stories, convincing ourselves that things really did happen in a particular way. And this allows us to sleep with a clear conscience, to remember our goodness rather than our mistakes. This is what happens when we speak of the winner writing history. I recently understood this in a new way after watching a documentary of Russia and better understanding Russia's impact on World War II and the way that the Western allies then basically wrote off the entire country and all of their sacrifice. And let me tell you, Russia sacrificed far more than I ever imagined. I had never heard that story before. This makes storytelling a dangerous endeavor. It means that we have to take care with the stories that we tell. Stories are useful, inspiring, important. They teach us to be and do better. They tell us who we are and what our future might look like. And they are woefully incomplete. We need to realize and expect the incompleteness, to embrace the missing pieces and search for them, find them, and then lament the parts that we missed. Reverend James Reeb's story in our UU history in the civil rights movement is radically incomplete. This does not mean his story is not worth telling or important, but it's missing some really important voices and perspectives. And I'd like to share a few of those missing pieces. To understand Reverend Reeb's story, we have to go even further back. One historical event does not erase others. In the century prior to the 1960s, Unitarianism and Universalism both struggled with racism in the denominations and in their churches. Black fellowshipped ministers were repeatedly denied parishes to work in because predominantly white congregations would not call them to be their ministers. One particular story is close to my heart, the story of Reverend Egbert Ethelred Brown. These and so many other stories are found in Dr. Mark Morrison Reed's books. He was a professor at Meadville Lombard Theological School, and many of his books can be found in our library here at church. Our failure to support ministers in their ministry is part of Reeb's story. We were not always so progressive.
I'm going to share with you the story of the first Black Unitarian minister. It has not been a story that we commonly tell, but we want to find stories about people of color that have been historically forgotten or ignored. And this is the story of Ethelred Brown. One morning, more than 100 years ago, on the island of Jamaica, a boy named Ethelred Brown went to church. Now, usually at this church, the people sang their creed, their list of what they believed. But that morning was Easter Sunday, a special Sunday. So instead of singing the creed, the pastor would say it one line at a time, and people would repeat it. This is some of what Ethelred heard. We believe the Father is God, the Son is God, and the Holy Spirit is God. And yet there are not three gods, but one God. So likewise, the Father is Lord, the Son is Lord, and the Holy Spirit Lord. And yet not three Lords, but one Lord. And the unity and Trinity and the Trinity in unity is to be worshiped. And Ethelred thought, what? He liked math, and he knew how to add, and he knew that 3 wasn't the same as 1. How could you have a unity in Trinity or a Trinity in unity? How can 3 things be one thing? How can one thing be 3? It didn't make sense to him. So right there, sitting in church, while everyone else was still saying they believed in a unity in Trinity and a Trinity in unity, Ethelred decided that he didn't believe that. He couldn't agree with what everyone else in the church was saying, and would have to find his own way. That afternoon, he went to his uncle's house, and on the table was a booklet with the words, "The Lord our God is one God." And Ethelred thought, yes, now that makes sense. And he borrowed the booklet from his uncle and took it home to read. The booklet was by the Reverend William Ellery Channing, who was a Unitarian minister in the United States. And after reading it and some other books, Ethelred decided he was a Unitarian too. But there was no Unitarian churches in Jamaica, so Ethelred knew he had to find his own way. So that's what he did for years and years. And he still liked numbers, and when he was grown up, he became an accountant, helping other people keep a good track of their money. He got married, and he and his wife had 4 children. Then, when Ethelred was 32 years old, he decided to become a Unitarian minister and start a Unitarian church in Jamaica. He didn't even know any other Unitarians, but Ethelred Brown didn't let that stop him. He found his own way. He wrote a letter to any Unitarian minister in New York City, and he put it in the mail. Eventually, he got the letter back telling him he had to go to a school in the United States to become a Unitarian minister. Now, Ethelred didn't have much money, and he'd never left Jamaica. But he didn't let that stop him. He found a way. He asked people to give him money. He said goodbye to his wife and children, and then he got on a boat to go to the United States. When he finally got to the United States, they didn't let him stay because he didn't have the right papers. But Ethelred didn't let that stop him either. He found a way. He went back to Jamaica, fixed his papers, and saved more money. Finally, 3 years after he decided to go, he arrived at Meadville Theological Seminary. He spent 2 years there, learning to be a Unitarian minister, and he was ordained in 1912. He was the first Jamaican to go to that school. He was also the very first black person to become a Unitarian minister. 100 years ago, that made a difference. Back then, people of different colors didn't mix. The teachers at the minister school told Ethelred that he couldn't be at a church with white people. They would want a white minister. Because he was black, he had to be a minister at a church with black people. Except there weren't any Unitarian churches with black people. So the Unitarian teachers didn't think he could be a minister after all. But that didn't stop Ethelred. He found a way. He went back to his wife and children in Jamaica, and he started a Unitarian church there. It wasn't easy because the church didn't have many people or much money. And he didn't get much help from the other Unitarians. But Ethelred had made his dream of being a Unitarian minister come true. And after 8 years, he decided to start another church, this time in the United States. and he and his family moved to New York City, and he started the Harlem Community Church in 1920. It wasn't easy there either. They still didn't have much money, and they still didn't get much help. His wife became sick, and one of his children died. Besides being a minister, Ethelred had to work long hours at an extra job he didn't like. But somehow, Ethelred found a way. For the next 35 years, Ethelred was the minister at the Harlem Community Church. And over the years, hundreds of people found their way there to pray and learn, worship, and sing, just like we do at our congregation. In fact, one of the songs we sing has a tune named after the Reverend Ethelred Brown. It is in our Singing the Living Tradition hymn book, and it's called I'm on My Way. Ethelred Brown always found a way to do what he believed in, and so should we.
Those 30 years in his church, he repeatedly wrote the AUA, the American Unitarian Association, asking for funds and acknowledgement of their existence, and they refused every single time. It is part of our history. But what about what was happening at the time of James Reeb's story? The pieces that are missing from his direct story. Well, first, the story of Jimmy Lee Jackson is missing. Jackson was a black man who peacefully marched less than 2 weeks before Reeb showed up in Selma. Jackson was beaten, shot, and killed by white men, including a state trooper. It was, in fact, MLK who spoke to President Johnson asking him why Reeb's murder was more important than Jackson's. And that is the question, is it not? Why Reeb's death as a white male minister was less acceptable than that of Jackson's. And if we go down that path, why were the multitudes of lynched men and women throughout the South, the strange fruit of Billie Holiday's song, not seen as more important than James Reeb? The second part of this story, of Reeb's story that's missing, involves the Unitarian Universalist ministers who showed up in Selma. According to Mark Morrison Reed, somewhere between a quarter and a third of fellowshipped ministers came to Selma. However, their stories are complicated. Many ministers lost their positions when their congregations refused to support them in the march. Some congregations had to force their ministers to go and threatened a loss of job if they didn't. And Reeb's incomplete story doesn't end there either. Less than 2 years after Reeb's story, the UUA, who had been founded by then, found itself one of the most diverse Protestant denominations in America. In an attempt to live into our denomination's faith, it promised 2 black caucuses, funding to support black liberation, faith, and programming initiatives, only to rescind that offer 2 years later because of financial issues. It cut funding to those groups rather than sacrifice other commitments. Unitarian Universalists then became the most white Protestant denomination in the US. This is known as the Black Empowerment Controversy, or as former UUA President Bill Sinkford will tell you, maybe it's better named the White Empowerment Controversy. There's actually a documentary you can find on YouTube of this event called The Wilderness Journey. And then we were called out by our faith, from within our faith, by ministers and lay leaders to end our racism and white supremacist systems in the 1980s, early 2000s, and once again, most recently, in 2019, the Commission on Institutional Change's report, Widening the Circle of Concern, which can also be found in our library. We have failed time and again to reach for the possibility of liberation. Our story is not so close to being finished, and so very, very incomplete. Why is Reverend James Reeb's story snipped and cut to our satisfaction? Because it's the story we can live with. It's the story that makes us look good. When Reverend James Reeb's story is told, as I told it at the beginning, we're reinforcing our own identity and worldview. We miss the truth, which is complex and nuanced. It's the truth. And in this moment of rising authoritarianism, the nuance must be named. When we tell James Reeb's story, it gives us much more than just truth, though. When we speak this truth and vulnerability and humility, his story and all these other stories become the link that liberates us from oppression, as oppressed or oppressor. We find dignity and grace in the complete story. We enter into the interconnected web, allowing us to be liberated from our own worldview in order that we might combine our stories toward completion, to form a community that lives and works toward justice. Reeb's story, in its fuller form, provides us an example of how stories are not only powerful, but dangerous. This is true of each and every one of our stories. The stories we tell in our everyday lives, the stories we tell about our church here, the stories we tell about our collective history. Anderson and Foley write that telling stories is the way to be human. Even as we create our stories, we are at the same time being shaped by the stories we fashion. This narrative approach to life is risky, however. Authentic life as individuals and in community reveals more than it conceals. It keeps the tension so that the stories we tell will reveal enough ambiguity and vulnerability to create and sustain human communities. Telling our stories means we're shaped by them. So the question becomes, are the stories we tell the ones that reaffirm our own personal worldview? Or are they the stories that shape us into community, shape us into justice, shape us into transformation? How might the stories we tell speak the truth to power and transform us into possibility and towards liberation?
Please rise and join us in singing our closing hymn, When Our Heart is in a Holy Place. Heart is in a holy place. When our heart is in a holy place. We are blessed with love and amazing grace. When our heart is in a holy place. When we trust the wisdom in each of us, every color, every creed and kind, and we see our faces in each other's eyes. Then our heart
This month, we will be exploring our monthly theme of holding our history. And I certainly invite you after this service to get a cup of coffee and come back, because Steve will be doing a presentation on our most modern history from the 1960s, our merger, up until the present, to hear more stories and learn about our faith tradition. As we go forth from this place, I invite you to reflect on your own stories, how they give you courage in this moment, how they make us better people, and learn more about them so that we can all be transformed by the stories of our lives. May it be so.
Please join me as we extinguish our chalice. We extinguish the light of this chalice, but not the light in our hearts. Until we meet again, may the warmth of our community carry you.